Click to Learn More, the show that sounds like clickbait.
But it's actually two dorks.
I'm Lidi.
I'm Dorm.
And Dorm.
Yes.
I've come to a realization recently.
Okay.
That my topics are normally animals.
Uh-huh.
Weird scientific things.
You do like that.
Uh-huh. Or murder.
Yeah. Those are usually the three.
It's kind of the ballpark of how my topics go. Is they're typically, they fall into that kind of category, right? So I figured, why not? Let's just keep it going. Let's just keep it rolling.
I'm gonna talk about wrestlers for 3 weeks, so you're fine.
Well, we're gonna talk about. So anytime you've ever seen a true crime show, or even like CSI or Law and Order.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
Oh, that was good. Sorry, I didn't mean to ruin your Law and Order bit. Quick question. Isn't the actual CSI called the CIS?
Oh, I don't know.
Isn't CSI like a TV thing?
Oh, crime scene investigation, and it's actually called
like
something else.
Crime investigation, something else.
Science. It's all nonsense.
Okay.
Enhance.
Yeah.
Enhance.
Gosh, that really bugs me, huh?
Zoom in and let me see this image of this man's sneakers.
This 4-pixel image is somehow now someone's head.
He's literally 500 feet away.
Yeah.
And he's the size of an ant. Zoom in. Let's see what brand his shoes are. Oh, and I could see on the tag on the back they're a size 10.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's not how that happens. That's not how that
images
works.
work.
It's actually detective work that gets things done. But on these shows, or like in a podcast or anything that's true crime related, even in the news, you'll hear like murder in the first degree or second degree murder and manslaughter and vehicular manslaughter and like all these manslaughter. You can't spell slaughter without laughter. There's all kinds of different classifications for a murder, homicide, etc. So we're going to talk about those because yes, I have I will say over 5 pages of notes and 9-point font. So
you told me this.
So I'm going to try to speak quickly and still be concise with these points. And I should also state that I know none of this information, absolutely none of it. I did not major in criminal psychology or criminal studies.
Criminal?
I didn't. See, obviously, I can't even say the word, so I don't know anything about it.
My favorite Harry Potter character.
Criminal.
Yeah.
Excelsior, criminal. That's my favorite one.
Excelsior?
Yes, you wouldn't know. It's a Harry Potter thing.
Oh.
Which I've definitely read and seen.
Yeah. Same.
So I'm going to try to get through it really quickly, but I don't know any of this stuff. So all of this information, every bit of this information came from another source. It came from somewhere else. And I'm just going to be upfront with you. A lot of it was just me going, I didn't know this. I'm going to put it in there.
Sure.
So this is not from me. And don't take any of this literally, because I could have gotten stuff confused. So don't go out and like do a murder and be like, oh, Lidi told me that this was just going to be manslaughter.
Don't snitch, basically.
You guys are saying it's murder in the first degree. What's the deal? Because I'm not your lawyer and I don't know this, so don't blame me.
I like that you're protecting yourself by saying, first of all, I didn't write a lot of this, and second of all, even if I did,
if I did do, yeah,
don't trust me.
Yeah. It's kind of like backing up over trying to make sure that nobody thinks that I did a crime. For instance, O.J. Simpson. I didn't do it, but if I did, here's how I would have done it.
You're the John Kerry of podcasting.
And then proceeds to tell you exactly how that poor woman died.
That's a good modern politics reference, John Kerry.
Yeah, remember when he had flip-flops? People would hold up flip-flops and mock him with those.
That's all I remember because I was a kid. And I don't
casual
remember...
footwear. I don't understand why people were so mad about
sandals.
that. Yeah, just friendly. Now, as we spoke briefly about in our autopsy episode, there are typically 5, quote, manners of death. So these are natural death, accidental, homicide, suicide, and undetermined.
And then the 6th, spontaneous
combustion. Right. The secret 6th.
Yeah, the 6th sense.
An accidental can either be a death that's resulting from a risk that's reasonable or neither deliberately assumed nor intentionally created by another person, and B, it's a death that's resulting from deliberate assumption of unreasonable risk. So if you jump out of a plane, your chute doesn't go off. That's an accidental death.
Got it. Okay.
That's not considered a suicide, and it's not considered natural because it's not a heart attack or something like that.
Nothing natural about
there's
jumping out of an airplane.
there's nothing natural from trying to fly. Quit it. So it's not it's not intentionally happening. So it can also be considered accidental. For instance, if like you jokingly push somebody and they trip and fall and hit their head and die, that was an accidental death.
Yeah.
But the classification for it can, so it's not going to be, in other words, if there's not probable cause, it's not going to be considered first-degree murder because you didn't act with intent.
Sure.
But it is still going to be manslaughter because it was accidental. But we're going to get into all that. Okay.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, I think keep that in mind if you think about pushing people around.
Yeah.
So today we're going to focus on the act of killing.
Yay.
A killing is considered a moral attack on a human or humans by another human or humans.
A moral attack?
A moral attack. Yeah.
What is
So it's like a moral attack is considered like you were doing this thing knowing that you're going to cause harm to this person. So you're doing a thing with the intent to hurt a person. So so it's considered a moral attack, I guess, because like we say she's got no morals.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't understand why the word moral is being used there. It's a context I've never heard moral in.
I don't know. Now, the fatal attack can be direct or indirect, as well as intentional or unintentional. So it can still be murder. You can accidentally do it.
Yeah.
You can indirectly do it, and it can still be considered murder. Now, most societies consider murder to be an extremely serious crime. Go figure.
Wow.
And
Most?
yeah. Okay, so an honor killing. Have you ever heard of honor killings?
No.
So there were these two young girls, and I believe their father was from Pakistan, but I'm not positive on that. But he had these two young girls, and they had jobs, and they were secretly seeing boys on the side. So they had arranged marriages waiting for them, but they didn't want to do that, and they were going to run away. And their dad found out. Like, he was constantly watching them, and he put them in a car and shot both of them.
Jesus.
Killed them both. Yeah, I wouldn't suggest it, but their 911 call is out there. And it was
Sorry, sidebar. I literally don't know, because you've mentioned this before. My mom's mentioned it.
Yeah.
Of listening to 911 calls.
So sometimes you don't. It comes up in the true crime story, or it comes up in the podcast. It's not something that I seek out.
Sure.
I don't go looking for it, but sometimes it happens, and then because it is interesting in the grand scheme in the context of the story, it is not something I would listen to for fun.
Yeah.
For instance.
But I don't even see how you stomach it, because I was at home and Mom was watching some Forensic Files, I'm sure, or some show like that.
Yeah.
And they were talking, like, one of their daughters had been kidnapped by a guy, and they just shared. It wasn't even the 911 call. It was the hostage, or the person holding or the kidnapper, and the mom of the kidnapped girl.
Yeah.
And she was just like trying to play it cool and then pleading with him.
Yeah.
And I started crying.
Yeah.
Like, it immediately just made me start crying, because it was harrowing, and I was like, I gotta leave. Like, I had to like leave the room.
There have been a few 911 calls that I have heard that I will never listen to again. Like, you hear people dying. It's
Jesus.
Some of the worst sounds that I've ever heard. And I consider myself, I listen to true crime when I fall asleep at night. So I consider myself a little bit desensitized to it at this point as far as like shock value goes. But so that should say something, like being able to hear those and knowing that, like, I think the stories that give me the most are when people know they're about to die.
Yeah.
Like, they're aware they're about to die.
Yeah.
And they're seeing their own their mortality in front of them.
Yeah.
Like, they're seeing that happen. And they're like, I'm gonna die now. Like, there's no help for me. And you can hear it in their voices. Like, that's the worst for me.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That
makes sense.
That's the worst for me. And then B, like, knowing there's no one coming. Like, knowing that there's no help for them. Like, they're gone. So, like, nothing could have happened to save them. Like, that's what gets me the most. And we talked briefly once before about a 911 call in which a woman, a newlywed, was hiding from her husband in the bathroom, and she is calling the cops, and he's like trying to break the door down to kill her, and in her panic she gives the wrong address to her home, and the cops show up at the wrong house, and she's dead. Like, she got killed. But I mean, like, in her panic she got like a couple of the numbers mixed up. And it was like that one single tiny little detail ended her life. And obviously her horrible husband. But like one little thing, that was the thing that did it. So like, that bothers me. Little details like that. That's what bothers me. And I guess it's kind of, to try to put a positive spin on it, at least stuff still bothers me.
Yeah, that's good.
Like,
I guess.
Like, at least things still affect me. So There we go. Also, I think earlier when you're talking about moral, I think it's mortal.
Oh,
I don't think it's supposed to be moral.
Okay.
It's a mortal attack on a human.
Got
I
it.
think that's
All
what
right.
it's supposed to be.
I just thought there was some like second definition of moral I didn't know.
I think you're right. I'm gonna say I think that's probably what it's supposed to be because when I typed it up, I probably left a T out. I'm gonna guess that's what it is. But anyway, that man that killed his daughters in the car.
Yes. The Pulp Fiction scene.
They considered it an honor killing because
he wasn't in prison for it or anything.
They went against, so he's on the run. They don't know where he is. They think he probably went back home where he wouldn't be in any trouble because...
Oh, they were in the U.S.?
Yeah, they were in the U.S.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought they were still in Pakistan.
Yeah, they were in the U.S. from there. Authorities think he went back over there, but he's never been found. And they consider that an honor killing because...
Which is...
Well, it's so... The idea behind it is that his daughters were disobeying him and bringing... ruining the reputation of his family.
So bringing dishonor on him?
Yeah, basically. Okay. And so by killing them, he restored honor to his bloodline and to his family, and that would not be considered a crime.
It's the murder equivalent of nipping something in the bud to them.
Pretty much. I mean, it like them being this family, not being a people in specific, but
sure, yeah.
Them. I did the same thing, but them being this particular instance, his idea of fixing the problem of his daughters trying to like have a life and be their own women was to kill them. So that's considered an honor killing, and it's horrible.
I just never heard that term before.
Yeah, it's really terrible. So most societies, as we said, consider murder to be an extremely serious crime, and then, of course, that means they believe that the person charged should receive harsh punishments for the purposes of retribution, deterrence, rehabilitation, or incapacitation. In most countries, a person convicted of murder generally faces a long-term prison sentence, possibly a life sentence, and in a few, the death penalty may be imposed. So the death penalty is used a lot less than a lot of people think it is. So a lot of people think that you're automatically going to get the death penalty. Sure. Depending on the severity of the crime, it depends based on where you are. A lot of places don't have it anymore. Yeah. A lot of places, it's a little different. So homicide, we're going to start with homicide. Okay. It's when one human causes the death of another human. Like, that's it. You cause the death of another human, that's homicide. Not all homicide is murder, and some killings are manslaughter, some are lawful, and which is when justified by an affirmative defense, like insanity or a self-defense case. So they have the stand your ground law, right? Right, yeah. Where like somebody comes into your home, you can shoot them. They have a gun. So even then, if somebody comes into your home and they technically, by law, if they don't have a weapon, but you shoot them, you can still be charged.
Oh, really?
You could still be charged for that because there was no threat. There was no direct threat on your life at that moment. You have to show. So the same thing, if somebody breaks into your home and then runs away and you shoot them in the back, there was no immediate threat to you if you shot them in the back, and therefore you could get charged for that. So it's a lot, which is kind of not fair in a way, right? Because somebody breaks into my home.
I'm going to assume they have a gun.
My assumption is
even if they don't show me one.
One, you have a weapon. Yeah. Two, you're going to hurt me with said weapon. Yeah. So whether you're running away or not, my first thought is I have to stop you.
They're coming back
from this thing that you were going to do. The only reason you're running is because I scared you off. Like your intention was, you're not thinking at that point.
No,
you're
it's
not
all adrenaline.
Yeah. So that all of that gets a little muddy for me.
I have a question. Yeah. If you address it, just don't ignore my question.
Okay.
So you said a homicide is literally any time one person causes the death of another person. Yes.
Yeah.
If you are like how indirect can it be and still be considered a homicide?
I think we kind of touch on that, but if I don't answer your question, bring it up again. Okay. So there's multiple asides, quote unquote, when it comes to types of homicide. All right. So if you think of like
pesticide,
fratricide, like for real, like anytime you kill anything, it has an aside at the end of it. So like even killing an animal has an aside at the end of it. So
really?
Yeah, I looked it up. It was something along the lines of pesticide, but it was something else. And like if you kill your brother, it's something, and if you kill a king, it's something, and if you kill your parent, it's something.
Like patricide or matricide.
Yeah.
Father and mother. Okay,
yeah. So everybody has an aside at the end of it based on who they are. There's even like killing women, like strictly killing women is a certain one, and it's So homicide has a lot of asides on the end of. So homicide is just the killing of a human.
Got it.
So
yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, so that's how.
Never thought of the word breaking down like that. Yeah,
So that's how I'm bringing that back around.
Gotcha.
A homicide requires only a volitional act, and this just means that an individual decides on and commits to a particular course of action, aka they've just made up their mind they're going to do this thing.
Okay.
Like they've decided they're going to do this thing.
Okay.
By another person that results in death, and thus a homicide may result from accidental, reckless, or negligent acts, even if there's no intent to cause harm. So you've decided to do something. You
Like drive drunk.
You decide to drive drunk.
Got
You
it.
decide to do this thing. You decide to. Your friend's skateboarding and you decide to kick it out from under him. He falls, breaks his neck. You decided to do the thing that caused the harm. So even if, or even negligence. So like if you decide, like, you know, your buddy's up on a roof and you decide to walk away for an hour and then you come back and he's fallen down. You made a decision that has somehow caused a person to be hurt.
Yeah. You decide not to fix your lead pipes and then someone dies of lead poisoning.
Yeah. So a decision to do something or not to do something that directly results in this, that is still considered in some way. It falls under this umbrella.
Makes sense.
So it's it kind of like is a snake eating its own tail, right? So like it kind of loops around a few times, which is why it can be confusing, which is why I'm going to try to clear it up. But even then I confuse myself. So
like those really fancy sausages.
What, like summer sausage?
Like I'm not thinking of summer sausage. Well, I've always ever seen like little pieces of summer sausage, but I'm thinking like the really like fancy like spindles of sausage that all lay flat.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking of. Listen, I gotta lighten the mood somehow. This is just so depressing.
Spindles of sausage. Well, so we're going to talk about specific types of homicide and murder later and people who have done these things. But this is all just like...
Great.
but this is all just like a
I
generalization.
still have the habit. I've done this in Discord calls and stuff too. I still have the habit of looking to a camera that doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
I've been doing it too.
I've turned to the camera, which is nowhere in my desk. I'm just looking at my desk.
I've been doing it too, I understand. Homicides can be divided into many overlapping legal categories, including murder, manslaughter, justifiable homicide, killing in war, either following the laws of war or as a war
I
crime.
never thought of war as a homicide.
Right, yeah. Euthanasia.
Which is terrible.
And capital punishment, depending on the circumstances of the death. So if you think about it, capital punishment is still a homicide.
Yeah.
You're still killing someone.
Yeah.
You're making a decision to do a thing that is killing someone.
Right.
Let's see. These different types of homicides are often treated very differently in human societies. Some are considered crimes, while others are permitted or even ordered by the legal system. Now, criminal homicide takes many forms, including accidental killing or purposeful murder. Criminal homicide is divided into two broad categories, murder and manslaughter, based upon the state of mind and intent of the person who commits the homicide.
Okay.
So murder is the most serious crime that can be charged following a homicide. So in many jurisdictions, homicide may be punished by life in prison or even capital punishment. So this is where your first degree and second degree murder comes in. Although categories of murder can vary by jurisdiction, murder charges fall under those two categories. So first degree is premeditated, unlawful, intentional killing of another person. You have planned it out, you want to do it, you know you're going to kill this person, and then you do it.
Yeah.
That's first degree murder. That's the highest degree of being able to kill another person. In most states, first degree murder is defined as an unlawful killing that is both willful and premeditated, meaning it was committed after planning or, quote, lying in wait for the victim.
Oh.
For example, if a man comes home to find his wife in bed with someone else, 3 days later, he waits in front of that guy's house for him to leave, that guy leaves, he shoots and kills him. That's a premeditated murder. That's first degree murder.
This has always confounded me because, like, in a case like that, your sentence can be based around the fact of, did you kill the guy when they got caught in the act?
Right.
Or did you wait a day?
Right. The cooling off period, the fact that you've had time to stop and think about it, actually makes a huge difference in how a case is handled.
That's so wild to me.
So if it happens right then...
To me, it's the same crime.
If you see... It's interesting, right? Because if you walk in on it happening, that's considered a crime of passion.
Sure.
Which can be written off in a way for a lesser charge.
Yeah.
Because there was something that caused this act to happen. The other one, which is first degree, which is considered premeditated, means you've had time to think about it. You know that what you're going to do is wrong.
Yeah, sure.
And you're still going to do it, which is why it's considered a higher form of, or a worse form of murder, I guess. Because, like, not only have you had time to think about it, but you've concluded this is the course of action I'm going to take.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I'm so angry or so sad or so upset that I lash out without thinking,
Sure.
uh-oh, I've killed somebody.
I think the argument in that specific case would be maybe they just boiled over. Like, I don't think that there was, if you kill someone in a lover spat at the time or a day later,
Yeah.
they could just had time to, not defending this hypothetical murderer, by the way.
Right.
I just think they're both equally bad.
Right.
As opposed to one being way worse after 24 hours or whatever.
Yeah, because I could see it as...
Because where do you cut that off? Sorry, not to cut you off. But
Not to get you off.
where, like, at what point does it become an act of passion? Like, say you walk in on somebody, like, say this man walks in on his wife having an affair.
Right.
If he doesn't kill him in the first 10 minutes, is it premeditated? The first 20 minutes? Like, when does this cutoff happen?
As far as I know, it's the premeditated part is because you had to have planned it. So because it's not planned, you didn't walk in there knowing you were going to kill this person. You walked in there and then you see this person sleeping with your wife and then you kill them. That's not premeditated.
Okay, but what if you walk in, or what if you hear the sounds of them sleeping together?
So that's what second degree murder is. It's without any premeditation.
But hypothetically,
Okay.
you walk in on this, or you hear this affair, right?
Yes.
You're home.
Yes.
You decide to sleep on the couch because you're so tired.
Yeah.
You wake up and you kill them. You didn't come home planning to kill this guy.
That's first degree. You've heard it happening.
So what if he hears it and then 30 minutes later kills the guy?
That's premeditated.
So when do you cut off the premeditation?
Well, premeditation's in the act, like in the moment. So that's where the defense team comes in.
Right.
And that's where the prosecution comes in. So it's like they have to piece the story back together. They have to go, at what point did you hear this happening? And at what, based on the time of death of this person and based on the story of what they're saying. So you got home at 5 o'clock. This man was killed at 5:10. That's 10 minutes there. We can assume they argued back and forth. Probably the tensions are still high.
Yeah.
He kills him. That's going to still be considered like...
I think it's interesting that something is so definitive in our legal system and yet so undefined.
And that's a question that I can't really answer also because like I don't know how
Sure,
that goes.
yeah.
Like that's something that like basically it all comes down to premeditation. Like it all comes down to you have to decide I'm going to kill this person. Like you have to make that decision in your mind. You have to make, and that's all I know. That's all I know. That
Okay.
once
My argument is just I don't think there's I don't know how you can just say like he didn't think of killing them if he pulls out a gun.
I think the idea of it is saying like also having a witness that has you saying I'm going to kill you. That shows premeditation. Like you've thought about this act.
Really?
Yeah.
So if it's an act of passion and they say I'm going to kill you, that's enough for premeditation?
I think it is, but I mean, obviously I don't know, but
Right.
I'm thinking based on what I've read that you could consider it that way because you're making a statement that says I'm going to kill you, which is showing you're intending to kill this person, which it all comes down to intent and premeditation.
Sure.
So second degree is just without any premeditation, and first degree is with the premeditated. I don't know. I'm sure there has to be some kind of cooling off period. I don't know what that is.
Sure.
So I don't have an answer to your question.
Okay.
I don't know. In some jurisdiction, a homicide that occurs during the commission of a dangerous crime may constitute murder, regardless of the actor's intent to commit homicide. So in the United States, this is known as the felony murder rule. In simple terms, under the felony murder rule, a person who commits a felony may be guilty of murder if someone dies as a result of the commission of the crime, including the victim of the felony, a bystander, or a co-felon, regardless of their intent, or lack thereof, to kill, and even when the death results from the actions of a co-defendant or third party who's reacting to the crime. Crime's weird, man. Murder and crime's real weird.
Co-felon is the nicest thing you could call
Yeah.
another criminal.
Hey, is this your coworker? No, it's my co-felon. Manslaughter is a form of homicide in which the person who commits the homicide either does not intend to kill the victim or kills the victim as the result of circumstances that would cause a reasonable person to become emotionally or mentally disturbed to the point of potentially losing control of their actions. The distinction...
Will you say that again? You talk so fast I couldn't follow you. I'm sorry.
The whole thing?
I really want to know. After you said the first sentence. The first little bit, sorry.
Man,
you talk so fast, I'm sorry, I got lost. I want to know.
I'm just trying to get through it because we're not even on like page 2, and I really don't want to make it a two-parter. Manslaughter is a form of homicide in which the person who commits the homicide either does not intend to kill the victim or kills the victim as the result of circumstances that would cause a reasonable person to become emotionally or mentally disturbed to the point of potentially losing control of their actions. The distinction between murder and manslaughter is sometimes said to have first been made by the ancient Athenian lawmaker Draco.
Malfoy?
Yeah, in the 7th century BC, the penalty for manslaughter is normally less than the penalty for murder. I know what you're gonna say. This sounds like second-degree murder.
It does. I was
know.
just gonna ask.
I know. I don't know how they determine it.
Okay.
I think it's based on jurisdiction. It's
That
based
makes
on
sense.
it's based on evidence.
And I don't mean to attack you. I'm sorry. It's just very confusing.
I know very little about this. I
Okay.
just have a little bit. But manslaughter is broken down into voluntary and involuntary manslaughter.
Okay.
So not only do we have first degree and second degree murder, then we have manslaughter. We
Jesus
have involuntary. I know. Involuntary. This is why I said like this stuff is so confusing. I never knew the difference between first and even in some cases they say third degree murder. Like, what? There's just
Like,
so
who
much.
said that was a thing?
There's so much. It kind of depends on the location where it's taking place. It kind of depends on the evidence that they have, how much of it or how little of it they have.
Sure.
And often, because manslaughter carries a lesser charge, they might say, okay, well, it's second degree murder. That's going to put you in prison for 50 plus years with no chance for parole, or you can have parole in 20 years, whatever.
Yeah.
And then they'll plea out of it and say, well, I'll agree that I did it if you'll say
Sure.
it's manslaughter, and then
it's
now
15 and I get parole or
I
whatever.
only have to spend 10 to 15, and maybe I'll get off for good behavior.
Sure.
So sometimes they can plea out of it. Voluntary manslaughter is the intentional, unpremeditated killing of another person as a result of a disturbed state of mind or heat of passion, as we talked about. Examples could include a defender killing a home invader without being placed in a life or death situation. So we kind of touched on this earlier. Like, somebody breaks into your home, their intent is to steal. You assume they're going to hurt you. You kill them in some way. You can be charged.
I feel like if I were a defense lawyer, that would be the ideal case to defend.
Right?
I would have to imagine that defense lawyer wins 80% of that.
It would be really hard to convince a jury of your peers that that person wasn't there to hurt you in some way.
Yeah.
Like, even if they don't have a weapon, the homeowner has no idea if they're on drugs or alcohol or like...
Could have a pistol in their pocket.
Yeah, the homeowner has no way to know any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if your defense is, well, they thought it was their own apartment. It doesn't matter
Sure.
at that point. Like, no.
Real quick, would you be a prosecuting attorney or a defense attorney?
I feel like I would want to be a prosecuting attorney.
I would absolutely be a defense attorney.
I feel like I want to be that because I feel like I couldn't be. I'm so nosy. I couldn't be a defense attorney and not want to know, because a lot of defense attorneys don't want to know if their client did it or not.
Yeah.
Because they go into it with the assumption they did not.
Yeah.
Like, that's how they have to approach it, and I don't think that I could remain unbiased. I think I would
Fair
want to
enough.
know.
Yeah.
I'd want to
That
know.
makes sense.
I would need to know if what they're telling me is true. I would want to be able to believe them. So in that case, I think that I would rather instead come at it from oh no, you did this and I'm going
Right.
to prove it.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's
I mean, that is probably the position of a good person. I think it would be fun to
No,
be like,
I think
I got you.
I think it's definitely more difficult to be a defense lawyer
absolutely,
than it
yeah.
is to be a prosecutor.
At least morally difficult.
Yeah, as far as like not necessarily, and also not to paint with a broad brush, but this is a case by case basis, obviously.
Sure.
It was going to be real hard if they catch you like covered in blood on a CCTV
Right.
camera. You
Although,
know,
I don't know.
like
Robert Durst
like
did all right.
thumbs up. Hey, I just killed a woman,
Yeah.
and then it's in court, and you're like, it's not him. Like you
Yeah.
know, like how do you anyway?
The gun went off.
Yeah, it was unintentional. So the most common type of voluntary manslaughter occurs when a defendant is provoked to commit homicide. This is sometimes described as a crime of passion, like we talked about a little earlier. In most cases, the provocation must induce rage or anger in the defendant, although some cases will have held that fright, terror, or desperation will suffice. So, for example, somebody gets kidnapped. They are certain they're going to die. They get away from from the person that's kidnapped them. They find a gun or grab a weapon, shoot them. That's going to be...
That should not be a crime.
Right? But, I mean, like, if in the first,
legally.
15 seconds somebody snatches you off a street, holds a gun to your head, you somehow get it away from them and kill them, that could be, I think, considered voluntary manslaughter because, yeah, you voluntarily did it, but it was to save, like, you were
Yeah, you're acting in
terrified and it was...
self-defense.
Yeah. which was a self-defense kind of thing. And then we've got the crime of passion thing of, like you can walk in on your wife banging somebody else.
The timer is still up in the air on the crime of passion.
Involuntary manslaughter is the unintentional killing of another person through an act of recklessness that shows indifference to the lives and safety of others, or an act of negligence that could reasonably be foreseen to result in death. The act that results in death may be intentional, such as pushing somebody in anger, but their death, such as subsequently falling, striking their head, and suffering a lethal head injury, is not. So it's normally divided into two categories, constructive manslaughter and criminally negligent manslaughter, both of which involve criminal liability. So it's like we're breaking down.
Jesus,
I know.
yeah.
Imagine knowing all of this.
What was
right?
the name of the thing you did in science with the trees?
With the trees.
Not Punnett squares, but it was something similar.
I know what you're talking
That's
about.
what this is reminding me of.
It just branches off further and further and further. Yeah. It's a ridiculous amount of information that you should just be able to go, did they do it?
Yeah.
Is there evidence?
Cool.
Murder.
Crime.
Go to prison.
Yeah.
Did they do it? Was there reasonable doubt? Which I guess that this is the entire
Great
purpose.
album.
This is the purpose of court. This is the entire.
Sure. Yeah.
This is the entire
that
point
makes
of
sense.
it. This is the reason we have that, so the people like us can't go, did they do it? Did they mean it? Yeah. Jail.
Our pitchfork army.
Yeah. So this is the whole reason that they have criminal court cases.
Sure.
Go figure. Who knew? So constructive manslaughter, which may be charged in the event that a person causes a death without intention, but as
site.
but as the result of violating an important safety law or regulation. So drunk driving.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, is that not vehicular manslaughter?
So that's part of it.
Oh God, there's another branch. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, trust me.
So many Michelle branches up in here.
There's a lot of it. We're going to talk for 1,000,000 miles. Or is it 1,000,000 miles?
1,000 miles.
1,000. I'm going to talk for 1,000 miles. So this is where it gets really interesting. So reckless driving or reckless handling of a potentially lethal weapon. Let's start over. Reckless driving or reckless handling of a potentially lethal weapon.
Like a movie.
Thank you for doing the joke again.
I bit on the first take when you bit.
May result in a death that is deemed manslaughter. So if you're recklessly driving and you hit someone on the street, that could be considered manslaughter. Involuntary manslaughter may be distinguished from accidental death. So a person who's driving carefully, but whose car nevertheless hits a child that darts out into the street, has not committed manslaughter.
That makes sense.
A person who pushes off an excessive drunk, why are you looking at me? Or an aggressive drunk, not excessive, I'm excessive, who then falls and dies,
In excess, the band.
has probably not committed manslaughter, although in some jurisdictions it may depend on whether, quote, excessive force was used.
Ah, Jesus.
Right. So is it, okay, so now they're going to look at the case like this, right? I know. So they're going to look at, okay, well.
I don't feel as bad for questioning it now because there's literally every question possible.
Yeah, so did you, so this is why, again, we have prosecutors and defendants, right? Or defense attorneys, because they have to get to the bottom of this. So they have to say, okay, well, when this drunk was leaning against you, were they trying to take your clothes off of you? Were they trying to assault you? Or were they leaning on you and you shoved them to the ground out in traffic? Or, what is, they need to know the entire story. So,
Sure.
If somebody accidentally bumps you and it just so happens they're drunk and you shove them and they slam their head into a wall and die, that's probably excessive force.
Yeah.
And that's going to be...
That makes sense.
And that's going to be able to be determined most likely through the autopsy. So this is where all of this stuff starts tying in together. So, if you see...
Liddy's podcasts are actually all one big narrative that she's trying to weave.
Little do you know, it all comes back to tardigrades.
Oh, God.
So for instance, they can look at this man and see that he's got a fractured skull and a broken arm and think, okay, well, there was definitely more than a push that you did to this person.
Right.
You've done some form of excessive force to get this person off you, and you've claimed, oh, well, we just pushed him. Well, the evidence proves
Otherwise.
the evidence proves otherwise. So it's a little it's all kind of tied up together in this really, really messy bow.
Painted up in blue.
That the law, the law system then has to pull apart thread by thread. So this is where, and this is kind of where a lot of cases hit snags because,
thread joke.
Getting all of that information together and getting it all out in a cohesive manner and getting a reliable witness or, you know, testimony or whatever. Like, all of these things have to come into play. And this is why we're seeing a lot of these shows now that are like, an innocent man went to jail and innocent person died in prison. And, you know, it's because it's so much easier to go, oh, well, this definitely happened based on the evidence. Let's move on to the other 500,000 cases we have that need to be solved. So, you know, because of that, we see a lot of these true crime shows now that are like, hey, we think you actually might have sent somebody to prison that didn't need to go.
Or maybe they did.
Or maybe they did, and then they determined that they did.
That's why we're making a series.
That's why we got a show. Criminally negligent manslaughter is variously referred to as criminally negligent homicide in the United States.
Of course it is.
And it's called
we need more confusion.
Gross negligence manslaughter in England and Wales.
That's way better.
Yeah, gross negligence.
Yeah.
England and Wales also had a much cooler way to talk about like undetermined deaths, or they had another method of killing or death, and it was it was death by misadventure.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Which was very cool to read. Like, I'm sorry that you died, but your death sounds super cool. Like, you know, it was base jumping or whatever.
Yeah, it's
like,
the thing I told you. It's like, if I'm gonna die on a specific date, I want to die in a weird way.
Yeah, it needs to be like by misadventure. Like, you accidentally blew yourself up with dynamite. We don't know how you got it, but somehow
I'm just picturing Nathan Drake dying.
Somehow you blew yourself up. We don't know what happened. I just like that a lot. And so this occurs where death results from serious negligence, or in some jurisdictions, recklessness. A related concept is that of willful blindness, where there's a defendant intentionally putting themselves in a position where the defendant will be unaware of the facts that would render them liable. A lot of this stuff is, did you put yourself in a situation where someone could have died?
Yeah. What did you do?
And what have you done in this instance?
Right.
And were you there when this person died? And did you cause it in any way? It's really complicated, y'all. It's a lot. And I'm sorry that it's a lot, but it's a lot. And it's really interesting to me, even though I understand maybe 15% of it. So here we go. Criminally negligent manslaughter occurs when there's an omission to act when there is a duty to do so, or a failure to perform a duty owed, which leads to death. So, for instance, this would mean like a doctor doesn't notice that a patient's oxygen supply is disconnected. Like they're not paying attention. So they're being negligent. That person dies. That's considered criminally negligent manslaughter.
Wow.
So because you weren't doing your job,
Right.
essentially.
Do your job.
You're not doing your job. So if you don't do your job, somebody could die, and you know, there we go. Another example could be leaving a child in a car on a hot day. Like, you were negligent.
Sure.
You didn't think about it. Kid passes away. You didn't mean to kill the child.
Of course not.
Unless they can prove that you did, right? Yeah. So it all comes back around, big old wheel. In some jurisdictions, such as some U.S. states, there exists a specific crime or vehicular or intoxication manslaughter. So this is vehicular manslaughter. An equivalent in Canada is causing death by criminal negligence under the criminal code, punishable by a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. But yeah, so this is basically, and then meanwhile in the U.S. we have somebody that's mowed people down and then like says they had the flu. Do you remember that?
No.
There was a college kid that was like, "Oh no, I was definitely just had the flu," and was like on medication and drove and killed people. And they
that
were
was
like,
their defense?
Yeah, got away with it. And then about maybe a year later, was on parole and was photographed or maybe recorded at a party playing beer pong. So it's like, yeah, you know, maybe not such a good look. Maybe not such a good look there. Now, there are defenses to homicide, like self-defense, like we talked about.
Sure.
So not all homicides are crimes or subject to criminal prosecution. Some are legally privileged, meaning that they're not criminal acts at all. Others may occur under circumstances that provide the defendant with full or partial defense to criminal prosecution. Now, this includes self-defense, like we talked about, being able to defend yourself or others. In dire circumstances, that's the use of deadly force. And there's something else, as mental incapacity. A defendant may attempt to prove that they're not criminally responsible for a homicide due to a mental disorder. In some jurisdictions, mentally incompetent killers may be involuntarily committed in lieu of a criminal trial. So instead of a criminal trial, they'll instead get committed.
Right.
Which is the insane, that's the defense that a lot of people say, mental insanity. Like, I can't do it. I went crazy. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Which is really dismissive of people that actually do have mental problems.
Sure.
Now, mental health and development are often taken into account during sentencing. So, for example, in the United States, the death penalty cannot be applied to convicted murderers with intellectual disabilities. So you can't.
I didn't know that.
There was some kind of, I don't remember what it was, but if they had an IQ under a certain level, you couldn't put them to death.
That's really interesting.
Because there was an understanding that they perhaps literally did not understand that what they were doing was wrong.
I don't know if I agree with that.
So it's interesting, right?
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it.
Because I'm assuming they either give them IQ tests or like in some way monitor their mental capacity and their abilities, and then determine based on it. So, I mean, I get it, and I get it in a way.
Yeah,
I do.
I mean, if the IQ, I wonder what the barrier was.
Because I mean, if you think about somebody that's mentally disabled that acts out and is not aware of their own strength or isn't aware of like
sure
how hard they pushed someone or something like that and they've killed someone, you know, that you can't hold them accountable.
Yeah, I guess I just had in my head the IQ would be higher than it probably was. Like I had in my head that it would just be like I don't know, like you know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you. Some countries allow conditions that, quote, affect the balance of the mind, end quote, to be regarded as mitigating circumstances. Now, this means that a person may be found guilty of manslaughter on the basis of diminished responsibility rather than being found guilty of murder, if it can be proved that the killer was suffering from a condition that affected their judgment at the time. So, for instance, depression, postpartum disorder, postpartum depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, medication side effects. Like these are all examples of conditions that may be taken into account when assessing responsibility. So maybe at the time, maybe their IQ was above the level, but they were suffering from depression or postpartum.
Sure.
Maybe PTSD affected them and they acted out in a way that they wouldn't normally act out, but because of these mitigating circumstances, they caused them to act in this way and cause this crime. Mental disorder may apply to a wide range of disorders, including psychosis caused by schizophrenia and dementia. And it's important to say right now, I should go ahead and just get this out of the way. A lot of people have the horrible conclusion in their minds that a person that has any kind of mental issue or like mental health issue or at all are dangerous. And that could not be farther from the fact.
No, yeah, that's not true.
But that is a common misconception that people have. Like, oh, if they have schizophrenia, they're automatically going to be dangerous, and that is not at all what I'm trying to promote, and that is not at all the message of what I'm trying to get through here. It can be an aspect, just like being a butthead can be an aspect, or being drunk, or being angry, or being sad, whatever.
Sure.
Any of these aspects can affect it. That is not to say that if you are schizophrenic or suffering from dementia, you're going to be a dangerous person.
Sure.
I just want to get that out of the way because that's a common misconception. Now, so usually, sociopathy and other personality disorders are not legally considered insanity because of the belief that they're a result of free will in many societies. So if you want to try to do the insane defense, it's kind of hard to get that through. It's kind of hard to plead insanity.
Despite what movies might tell you.
True, yeah. It's hard to plead insanity and get through with it because often, I mean, they'll be talked to by like 5 or 6 different psychologists who specialize in different fields who will then come together and go like, oh, I think that they have multiple personality or dissociative identity disorder, and this person will say, well, I think they're suffering from this or this or this, and or maybe they're faking it to try to get away with it.
Right.
So often it's incredibly difficult to get away with the insanity defense, and don't try that. If you did it, just own up.
Yeah.
Just go to jail.
That's not ever. No one's ever going to do that, though.
Just go to jail.
I mean, some people do, but no one's. Never mind.
I'm gonna fake.
No, I'm just gonna say no one's ever gonna not try some defense.
Oh yeah,
you know?
yeah, to get out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
In some jurisdictions, following the pretrial hearing to determine the extent of the disorder, the defense of, quote, not guilty by reason of insanity may be used to get a not guilty verdict. Now, this defense has 2 elements, like we were just talking about. So, the defendant, if they have a serious mental illness, disease, or defect, and that the defendant's mental condition at the time of the killing rendered the perpetrator unable to determine right from wrong or what they were doing was wrong. So, you have to be able to prove without reasonable doubt, or beyond the reasonable doubt,
Jay-Z album.
that what they did, the bad thing that they did, the murder that they committed, they were unaware at the time it was bad. So, if they show any remorse at all,
sure,
they know it was bad.
They try to cover it up at all.
They can't plead that defense.
Yeah.
So there's been many cases where people were like, oh, well, I'm just going to plead insanity. And it's like, okay, well, but we have you here, like, admitting to how sad you are that this happened and that you're so sorry. And they're like, you would have known that that's wrong then.
Right.
And they were like, oh, dang, you got me. Ah, shoot. Ah, shoot.
I like the flippant manner of this murderer. Beans.
Beans. I got caught again.
Dang.
Small children are not held criminally liable before the age of criminal responsibility. Do you know that?
What is the age of criminal responsibility?
We'll talk about it. A juvenile court may handle defendants above this
Is
age.
it a game show I didn't know I was part of? What just happened?
Child murderers.
Oh, no. The views of Lidi are not the views of Clicktle anymore.
RTs do not... Oh, what was it?
Oh, that was a really good joke.
Retweets
the first time you did
do
it.
not mean endorsement.
Yeah. That really got me the first time you did it.
Because homicide's a serious crime, some older minors are charged in an adult justice system.
Older minors.
Yeah.
It's a weird sentence.
Yeah, an old minor.
Yeah, an old young one.
An old little one. So age is sometimes also taken into account during sentencing, even if the perpetrator is old enough to have criminal responsibility. So I remember there was a case of this girl who was like 8 or 10, and she was at a daycare, and I think she was holding a baby, and it started to cry. She either dropped it, I think she dropped it on accident, and it started to cry. Mm-hmm. So to try to get it to stop crying, she started stomping on it. And,
Jesus.
And she killed it. She killed the child. And then she said that she had just panicked. But they tried her as an adult. I think she was 10. They tried her as an adult because of how terrible the crime was, first of all. And the fact that she was considered an older minor. So she was like, but that's pretty uncalled for. That's pretty unheard of to have someone that young. And then, I mean, if you think about it, we've got the 2 girls that stabbed the other girl over Slender Man.
Yeah.
They wanted to offer her up, and they were like, what, 12 years old?
I
like
don't
they
remember
were preteens or teens or preteens. I can't remember if they were being charged as adults, but I mean, you know, you've got kids doing all kinds of... There's, I think, Mary Bell, I think was her name. She killed a little boy. This was like way back when, before photographs had color. Because I've seen a picture of her.
Weird way to denote time, but okay.
Listen, when you've been alive for
Before
400...
the television, but after the radio.
When you've been alive for 400 years, you gotta find a way to describe
Yes,
things.
we all have our own markers.
But she killed a little boy, and then she showed back... This was when they still kept caskets, like, in homes.
That was a thing?
Yeah, so the reason that the wake, the reason that it's called a wake is so people used to put people's bodies in their living rooms and like stay up all night with them in case they woke up, because sometimes they weren't really dead.
I didn't know that at all.
So
that's jarring.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've read that somewhere before.
I believe it.
But they used to they would do funerals and have open caskets in their homes. So that's where they would take place. So this little girl, I think her name was Mary Bell, she shows up and she's like, hey, yo, what's up? I want to see that little kid that I killed. And the mom's like...
Oh, yeah, you've told me this story, I think, but not in podcast, but just...
Yeah, and the mom's like, he passed away, and, you know, he's dead. And she goes, oh, I know, I want to see him in his casket. What? That's a psychopath.
That's The Omen. That's the movie The Omen.
That's the devil. That's a demon. That's a demon child. Listen, people talk, why don't you have kids yet? You know what? I'm going to just read them a bunch of stories.
Whose voice was that?
Everyone.
Oh.
I'm just going to read them a bunch of stories about little kids killing other little kids. Terrible. Children are evil.
What is Lizzie Borden or whatever?
Yeah, Lizzie Borden. There's we'll talk about that someday. There's a little, I don't know.
How's there controversy to Lizzie Borden?
Because it may not have been her. It might not actually have been her. Or it may have been her and a couple other people.
Can something for once just be what I know?
Yeah. Water is H2O.
No, apparently water's not wet.
Oh, don't get started. Justifiable homicide or privilege is
committed only by white people.
but for real though.
Yeah.
Due to circumstances, although a homicide occurs, the act of killing is not unlawful. For example, a killing on the battlefield during war is normally considered lawful, but there are war crimes, which are not considered lawful. So, different sides of the same old coin.
Oh, yeah.
A homicide can only be justified as there's sufficient evidence to prove that it was reasonable to believe that the offending party posed an imminent threat to the life or well-being of another in self-defense. So that's why it's a war crime. So if people go in, they, on either side, whatever, kill a bunch of civilians, or kill a bunch of innocent people, that's not considered lawful because they were not a threat to you.
Or use, like, things that have been agreed upon as not used in war, like sarin gas.
Yeah. Or, like, Tony Stark's weapons.
Sure.
Like all of his bombs.
Yeah, with the what are the name of the Accords? Not Concordia. What is the name of the place?
Oh,
It's like Concordia, but it's not. It's
it's the place.
it's a place at the end of Avengers 2.
Yeah, the Age of Ultron. It's the place they broke.
It starts with a K.
Does it start with a K?
Yeah, it's the something Accords or a C. It's a hard like CK sound.
What else could it be? Keep coming up with words.
Concordia, Canova, Kahlua.
Oh, it's so close.
Do you have it?
No, I'm finding it right now.
Chronology.
No, it's not. It has a K in it.
Oh, what is it?
Sokovia? Sokovia.
Oh, Sokovia.
The Sokovia Accords.
Oh, is that? Oh.
That's it.
Well,
Yeah.
I think I was thinking of Covia. What did I say? I said Concovia Accords.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know.
You're
Whatever.
close. Yeah, we got it. That's all right.
The movie came out like however long ago.
The availability of defenses to a criminal charge following a homicide may affect the homicide rate. For example, it's been suggested that the availability of, quote, stand your ground defense has resulted in an increase in the homicide rate in the U.S. jurisdictions that recognize the defense, including Florida. No offense, Florida, but good Lord, you crazy.
Get your shit together, Florida.
Oh my God. So how worrying is that though? It's like, okay, so we've seen a lot of people saying if somebody breaks into your home, you can shoot them. I don't really like Tom lately. He's really just been giving me the stink eye. I'm gonna invite him over and say he tried to break in. I'm gonna shoot him, and I'm gonna say I was standing my ground. Because it's Florida, so why would I not? All right, so we're almost at the end. Oh my gosh, okay.
Oh, that one isn't nearly as long as I expected.
That's what she said.
Oh, because it's like a penis.
It's like a penis. We gotta listen. Florida.
I thought we had like an hour more.
Florida's America's penis. Have we gone an hour?
I
can't see by
probably almost.
I have my tiny little bat eyes. I can't tell.
Probably about an hour.
I can't tell because I have tiny little bat eyes.
I think it's like 52.
I don't use my
Hold on,
sonar.
Keep talking.
Okay, so big surprise, and by big surprise I mean not at all a surprise.
55.
All right, cool. Approximately 90% of murders in the U.S. are committed by males, which brings us to our next section.
They're gonna say white people.
Well, normally white males, if I'm going to be honest. Hi, friends. If you're hearing this message, that means that your good pal Lidi talked for too dang long about too many dang murders and the ways that murders happen and the stuff like that. So I think it's probably in our best interest to break this into a two-parter.
Yeah, if you're hearing this, then yeah, we have.
Oh.
Because if I don't, I just won't put it in.
The mysteries of editing are still exactly that to me.
Yeah, we'll see how it breaks down, but it is very possible that you were hearing this at the beginning, I guess, of an episode. Would I put it? I guess I put it at the beginning.
I would say, or maybe where you have to cut the end of the first one.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because it's...
All right, so if you just listened to the first part of Lidi's murder podcast, then, which is we're rebranding. If you listen to the first part of that, then Lidi's next episode, which would be episode 38, if I'm doing my math right, that will be the follow-up continuation of that conversation. So,
which will probably air which will be recorded, quote unquote, on the 28th. So
gotcha.
So it'll be
last episode in January.
Yes.
Or the beginning of February.
Or the beginning of February.
Yes.
Yes.
So again, apologies.
It's completely my fault.
No, I kept derailing you. It's fine.
I talked for 2 hours about how people murder each other.
I very aggressively, although I guess you just heard that in this one, I very aggressively questioned you about the the pitfalls of acts of passion. So.
Oh, I still need to look a couple of things up, actually. Anyway.
Yeah, we're gonna ramble, and this is gonna be a two-parter. So
we're gonna have a two-parter episode about how we have a two-part episode. Anyway, this is also a message for Dorm because he puts up with 2 hours of listening to me talk about murder. So thank you, Dorm. And
I didn't do anything.
Two sweets in the chat.
Thanks for listening, and yeah, you'll hear the rest of this next Lidi episode 38.
Yeah, next me episode is another murder episode because of this one, but you're gonna have a nice Storm episode in between, which is a nice episode that's not about murder and killing and death. And I love you. Goodbye.
Don't know that.
Oh, it's true. Flip script.
So don't be surprised when the next episode just kind of starts
just abruptly.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. I love you.
Bye.
Which brings us to